Today I'm going to start out with a very interesting article for recommendation. It's a very interesting article. It's titled, "Is Taiwan Next?" It's written by Sarah A. Topol in the New York Times, and it is dated August 4th, 2021. Again, the title is Taiwan Next?" The title shows the relationship between Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan through the eyes of a young woman who lives in Taiwan, who is Taiwanese. And it is one of the best explanations of Taiwan's status and culture that I have seen in a news story. It reads like a news story mixed with anecdotal stories from the Taiwanese woman who actually helped Hong Kong dissidents escape to Taiwan after the crackdown under the national security law forced on Hong Kong by Beijing. So again, I highly recommend this article because the relationship between Taiwan and China might not be easily understood by someone who hasn't lived here. I know it took me several years to kind of understand the different beliefs among the different generations in Taiwan. You have the older generation, which grew up under Taiwan under military rule by the Kuomintang, and who are more pragmatic towards unification with China. They think as long as, Taiwan can keep a good economy and not be under the same rules as China, then unification is desirable. Now, these people are now in the minority, though, especially since China took a hardline stance on Hong Kong. Their argument that Taiwan could maintain its rights and still be part of China doesn't wash now that China has shown their true colors and has cracked down on Hong Kong. And then you have the younger generation, and the younger generation has only known democracy, and they consider themselves to be only Taiwanese, and they have no desire whatsoever to unify with China. And this article goes into the differences between the generations and what led to those. So is a very good read. It might be a little bit meandering at times, but I would recommend reading it if you would like to know more about the situation with Taiwan and why things are so tense between China and Taiwan right now. Okay, today's main topic is an article that I saw written by Ian Duncan Smith. Sir Ian Duncan Smith is a member of Parliament in the UK, and he has been targeted by the Chinese government. So what was his crime? Well, he called out China over the spreading of lies and disinformation about human rights abuses in Xinjiang province. Many different news sources have reported on these human rights abuses, and the only person that denies this is or the only agency that really denies this is the Chinese government. So this member of Parliament, which is like the U.S. legislature, sort of, kind of, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, he said that China was lying and giving out disinformation about Xinjiang province. Back in March of this year, China imposed sanctions on 10 UK organizations and individuals, including Ian Duncan Smith. But for China, that's not enough. They are using other tactics to try to go after these people, because Ian Duncan Smith himself said he didn't have any financial holdings in China, no significant ties to the country. So the sanctions didn't really have much of an effect on him. So this article in the Telegraph, dated yesterday, Friday, August 6, 2021, says, the title is, Am I Being Impersonated by Chinese Activists? I'll read a little bit of the article to you, written by Sir Ian Duncan Smith himself, Member of Parliament. Early on Thursday morning, I awoke to find that someone purporting to be me had emailed colleagues asking to know their innermost thoughts on China and Chinese sanctions. At least one of my colleagues responded, thinking it was me. More emails have followed, and some have received a response. This is not the first time this has happened, since I, alongside a few colleagues, was sanctioned by the Chinese government earlier this year, and it's unlikely to be the last. I fervently believe that this attack comes from China, or more specifically, China's low-level security arm, the 50 Cent Army, a group of state-backed internet commentators or commenters who number up to 2 million. They are very active and relentlessly target critics of China. As a co-chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, which involves parliamentarians from the left and right in 20 countries, I know our site has also regularly been targeted on a number of occasions, even suffering what we believe is a full denial of service or DOS attack. All IPAC members believe the Chinese government is guilty of human rights abuses, including genocide, and that it poses a growing threat to us all. The Chinese security services know where their citizens have been, who they have seen, where they have shopped, even what they have bought. If someone from outside China travels to China, they will find that, at the very least, spyware will infiltrate their phones immediately. And it doesn't stop there. Beyond China, the long arm of the Chinese state security is infiltrating Western life more and more. The worst part of this is that too many Western governments have turned a blind eye to what has been going on. Look at the way even the UK has behaved. For a number of years, Huawei managed to become an integral part of our telecommunications system. Despite the government's belief, and despite the protestations by the company that Huawei, backed by the Bank of China, has to provide Chinese security with any data it has. There is growing evidence of Chinese research engineers and scientists working on the UK's top secret defense programs. On one, a drone project, a Chinese engineer returned to China directly after the program. Then there is hardline loyalist United Front. Incredibly, a list of 2 million members of the Communist Chinese Party given to IPAC revealed that members of the United Front were staffing UK embassies where they would have access to sensitive material. What makes this even worse is the way the Chinese security arm embraces privately run UK institutions. HSBC, for one, has frozen private accounts of Hong Kong democracy protesters who have had to flee persecution. And British judges and lawyers still ply their lucrative trade in Hong Kong, lending an air of respectability to the government-led oppression there. This whilst the owner of Apple Daily, now closed by the Chinese authorities, languishes in prison without a hope of release. His crime? To believe in a free press. Even now, some ministers here talk of trade and economic deals with China, whilst China carries out cyber attacks that close down sites here and abroad. Whilst recent intelligence given to IPAC co-chairs shows we face direct attacks, we will not be cowed. We believe we must stand up for those dealing with the tyranny of this brutal Chinese regime. That's why, for the sake of those tyrannized by this brutal regime, our message to the Chinese government is simple. You do your worst, but we will do our best. Okay, so this was a commentary by Sir Ian Duncan Smith, Member of Parliament in the UK. And evidently China is breaking into the emails of government officials now and posing as them online, which is a very serious crime and which definitely needs to be addressed. Can you imagine if, let's say, China broke into the email of Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi and sent emails using their accounts to other members of Congress pretending to be them? This is basically an act of war. And it's one that needs to be seriously addressed. We don't need to sweep this under the rug. The time for appeasement is over. There were decades of appeasement of the communist regime in China, hoping that if China opened its economy to capitalism, that it would force them to break down the walls that separate their country from the rest of the world. The walls that have been put in place by the Communist Party itself. And time has shown that is a fallacy. It's not going to happen. I read a comment earlier in the news, and it got me to thinking. Yes, Western culture has a hard time thinking in terms of Chinese culture. The Chinese think in hundreds of years, and they also hold a grudge for the same periods of time. They are still angry at the Japanese people for what the Japanese people's ancestors did during the Sino-Japanese War and World War II. They still hold a grudge against the Western world for selling their country opium and leading to the decline of China. They think of that period as 100 years of shame. So they've held these grudges for that period of time. And now the Chinese government, I think, believes it's time for retribution. They want to take retribution against Japan and the Western world for perceived wrongs that happened in the past 100 years. While this seems insane by Western standards, it's not in Chinese culture. So we need to wise up, and we need to let the Chinese government know that we are not going to take this sitting down. We are not going to allow them to spread their form of government, oppressive government, to the rest of the world. I think they think that Americans and other Westerners have short-term memory and that they can wait us out. But what they don't understand is our idea of freedom is just as strong as their idea of Chinese supremacy and cultural history. It's the one thing that holds Americans and Westerners together. That is the idea of freedom. And if someone starts trying to take that away, we will fight back with a vengeance. So my advice is Right now, the U.S., no matter the cost, needs to divest itself from China because all Chinese businesses are necessarily tied to the Communist Party of China. They all share information with the Communist Party of China. When you do business with any company in China, you are doing business with the Communist Party of China. And you are helping further their goals of genocide and oppression and terrorizing their own citizens and even the citizens of other countries. So we have to, the times ahead are going to be tough. We have relied on cheap products from China for too long. And, some investors are going to feel the hurt who have bet heavily on Chinese companies. But it's necessary to safeguard our freedom. And I know we can make it through this. If we can make it through World War I, II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, and still maintain our freedom in America, we can make it through this. Our grandfathers and grandmothers sacrificed for the war effort to defeat Hitler. They gave up meat on some days. They gave up certain products to support the war effort. My grandmother traveled to Michigan to help build airplanes for the Allied effort. My grandfather was stationed in England during the war. We can do this. We can safeguard freedom. And we can show China that we will not allow them to dictate a repressive regime for the rest of the world. Thank you for watching Jason Adam TV. Please leave a comment below. See you next time.